let's talk about the Iran war, and whether or not the U.S. government has underestimated Iran and its capabilities. There's a report out, there a few days ago, Washington Post came out with they got their hands on a confidential memo allegedly prepared by the CIA that basically said, look, Iran is in better shape than you think. They retain something like 70 to 80% of certain munitions and missiles. Also, accompanying that Washington Post report was reporting that we're not getting the straight scoop on the number of U.S. facilities struck by Iran, which is something like over 200 last time I looked. That's not being transparent. And then today we have a New York Times report similarly saying that Iran is not suffering as much as we thought, as we're being told they are. So what are your thoughts on Iran, the idea that they were imminently going to be able to produce a nuclear weapon, and how do you see this war playing out?
Well, several things. One is, I don't think the U.S. government underestimated Iran's resilience and capability to withstand U.S. military pressure. Donald Trump certainly did. He certainly ignored it. And I think the people who are whispering in his ear around him, and Pete Hegseth and others, they just believe that the United States could go in there and blow up the regime, and it's democracy is going to flourish. No, it's not the way it works. Secondly, I think it was Bibi Netanyahu that was the principal sort of agitator, because he's been pushing for regime change for a long time. And I think he filled Trump's head with visions that, Trump is going to be lauded as the person who actually brought down the theocratic regime in Tehran. And third, the Iranian nuclear program was nowhere near creating a nuclear weapon. Yes, they enriched uranium to the 60% level. I think that was to get, the world's attention, the United States' attention, in order to see if they could strike some deal. I think they showed back in 2015 when they agreed to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action under the Obama administration that they are willing to make concessions and compromises, which they did significantly. Quite frankly, I was surprised at how much they actually gave up in terms of destruction of virtually, all of their centrifuges, or 90% of them, giving up the heavy water, allowing intrusive inspections. So I think they recognized then, and they recognize now, that their economy really needs help. And the only way they're going to do that is if they can get sanctions relieved, as well as some of their frozen assets opened up to them. And I don't think the Trump administration ever seriously was pursuing negotiations. When you have Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and they're not really known as nuclear experts, engaging twice in negotiations, once last year before Israel and the United States bombed Iran's nuclear facilities. These were negotiations taking place in Oman. And then this year, right before the war that was initiated by the United States and Israel, there were similar types of negotiations with those two individuals. That's silly. That is foolish. And I think the Iranians saw that the United States was not serious, but yet they were pursuing those negotiations. Now the thing is, how can the Iranians have any trust in the Trump administration? Trump was the one who, again, tore up the previous agreement. He is notoriously dishonest and does not adhere to any types of promises or pledges that he might make. So I do think that there really needs to be a near-term effort to try to get the Strait of Hormuz opened up, and that the Iranians would agree not to threaten international shipping that goes through there. Mm-hmm. But they're only going to do that if there's some way to relax the United States blockade on Iranian ports. The Iranians are not going to give up the big issue, that they have, or leverage they have on the Strait, if they continue not being able to actually export any of their oil or import anything. And so that's the real sticking point. If we get some type of agreement on that, and the ceasefire then can hold, there need to be longer negotiations on other issues, including on the nuclear program. And I do believe the Iranians are willing to make significant concessions to do that. Also, there needs to be some way to ensure that Bibi Netanyahu is not going to blow up things again by just further bombing in Lebanon or going across the border. So it's a very complicated three-dimensional chess game here. Unfortunately, Donald Trump and the people that he has working with him are not able to understand those chessboards and how you can maneuver your chess pieces in order to try to gain some type of advantage so that you can prevent Iran from moving down that nuclear weapons process, but at the same time not being unrealistic and basically asking the Iranians to give up and surrender everything. They're not going to do it.
Yeah, no, they're not. I had minimal exposure, but some exposure to the Iranian government in the area of negotiations, and they're incredibly challenging to deal with, incredibly challenging. And sending your son-in-law and a real estate buddy to do the negotiating is atrocious. Yeah, and they're going to, back to the China trip that Trump's taking. Iran has said something like they want China to serve as a guarantor in any deal or negotiations with the U.S. What do you think that would look like if that happened?
Well, the Chinese have been able to play some of these mediating roles. It was China that brokered the deal that reestablished relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago, which was a surprise to many folks. I mean, usually the United States does something along those lines, but Iran does have, relations with China. And I do believe that Iran needs a superpower, and China is in that club, to basically guarantee any type of agreement that they might strike with the United States. And I think, President Xi at this point is trying to, maintain some type of neutral stance, I think, in order to preserve maybe that role in the future. But China also can offer Iran some economic, even financial inducements as a way to, find some type of compromise that's going to, again, bring this conflict to a close. And it will be quite interesting if, in fact, it's China that is able to bring some semblance of normality to the Gulf, because I think it will send a signal to the rest of the world, and certainly to some of the Gulf Arab states, that the United States is no longer able to play that role. Now they should be looking to China in order to help protect their interests, just the way Iran was able to look to China to protect its interests. So it's a very, very interesting dynamic right now, right, in terms of how China is going to maneuver. But as I said, Xi Jinping is a much better three-dimensional chess player than Donald Trump. So we'll have to see how this evolves.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't help make America great again to kind of cede our power position to China and perhaps others.